Hey everyone, welcome. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for this explainer today. We're going to be unpacking a brilliant core essay by Dr. Susan Edwards, which is titled Transformations, Acknowledging, Assessing, and Achieving Change. And we're actually going to use that exact same three-part framework to look at some really massive global shifts. From there, we'll funnel directly into her Theme 8 essay to figure out exactly how these macro transformations are impacting our worlds of work, and ultimately, how they're reshaping the future of our jobs on a very individual, personal level. To ground us before we start looking forward, let's look back for just a second. When Bob Dylan wrote The Times They Are Changing back in the 1960s, he was documenting these massive, sweeping social transformations. And today, more than half a century later, we are living through a similarly disruptive era. Mark Twain actually hit the nail on the head when he famously said, "History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes." So while the specific tech and global events we're facing today might be totally brand new, the actual human experience of navigating rapid, profound change, well, that's something we've done before. And it's exactly what we're doing right now, as all these technological and economic shifts completely redefine our reality. So here is our roadmap for today. First, the times are changing. Second, the digital reality. Third, navigating the new workforce. And fourth, skills for the future. All right, let's dive right into part one. The times are changing, acknowledging macro shifts. Because really, before we can even begin to understand the future of work, we have to acknowledge the massive environmental, economic, and social networks that are currently transforming the world around us. Everything is connected. These broad disruptions are basically the ultimate catalyst for how we live and earn a living. Think about this number for a second, $150 billion to $200 billion. According to Moody's Analytics, that is the estimated cost in damages and lost productivity from just the 2017 hurricanes alone, Harvey, Irma, and Maria. It perfectly highlights how closely the networks of nature and our economies are intertwined. Natural disasters force immediate, massive economic adaptation. But, as journalists like Clay Dello point out, long-term recovery efforts can actually bring positive changes that offset that initial economic wreckage. It forces nations to build back stronger and better withstand future disruptions. Basically, nature forces us to transform. But of course, it's not just nature forcing transformation, right? It's corporate economics too. Back in the year 2000, the United States had 10 major airlines. Today, there are only 4. And together, those 4 control a whopping 83% of the U.S. market. That kind of corporate consolidation is a massive driver of change. Seriously, if you ever paid for a checked bag, you have definitely felt this shift. According to the Bureau of Transportation Services, the fee revenues charged by these major airlines went from $543 million in 2007 to an absolutely astonishing $4.2 billion by 2016. So this raises a super important question for our global economy. As these multinational corporations grow larger and larger, do they transform the economies in ways that meet our future expectations, or do they kind of stifle the small businesses that traditionally act as the backbone of the economy? Now, right alongside those environmental and economic shifts, we are also navigating some really deep social transformations. A prominent example from our sources is Colin Kaepernick, who famously used his high-profile platform in the NFL to protest police brutality by taking a knee. Now, his gesture aimed to fight global oppression, while his detractors argue that the gesture was disrespectful to the nation's flag and its veterans. But regardless of where anyone stands on that specific issue, it brings up a really critical point from our source material about societal transformation. How do we actually achieve change if we fail to listen to one another? Navigating these divergent worldviews through respectful dialogue isn't just a nice idea. It is a mandatory skill for any society undergoing rapid transformation. Which brings us to Section 2, the digital reality, technology outpacing ethics. So, the ultimate bridge between those broad societal shifts we just talked about and the changing workforce is, for sure, the digital revolution. We have unprecedented access to big data today. But a recurring theme here is that our technology is advancing way, way faster than our ethics. I mean, we're seeing an incredible shift in workplace norms. Forget leaving your company badge at home. There's a Wisconsin-based company called 3 Square Market that has actually embedded microchips into their employees' hands instead of using badges or computer logons. They're hoping to eventually use this to create a totally cashless breakroom society. Now, they promise the chips aren't used for tracking, but it's a little dystopian, right? It really forces us to ask, has society transformed to the point where keeping information private is literally impossible? Big data is essentially this massive double-edged sword that we are actively having to assess every single day. Yale cardiologist Harlan Krumholz argues that open medical data could completely revolutionize healthcare. If our goal is to save lives, we need as many people working on the data as possible. Makes sense. But that exact same digital revolution makes the data vulnerable. Sharing hacked data has some really dark consequences, which we saw with the evidence of Russian hackers and bots interfering in the 2016 and 2017 elections across the US, France, and Germany. It led to a profound question posed by Chuck Todd. Can democracy survive the digital revolution? Technology is transforming society much faster than we can actually safeguard the data.
Moving on to Section 3, Navigating the New Workforce, Exploring the Worlds of Work.
Okay, bringing all of those macro contexts, the economy, nature, the digital revolution, directly into Theme 8, Worlds of Work, we really have to ask how these massive global trends disrupt your individual employment. And I want you to take a second and just let this next statistic sink in. Researchers predict that 65% of children entering primary school today will ultimately end up working in completely new job types that do not even exist yet. 65%. The world of work is going to change so drastically in the coming decades that more than half of the next generation's careers are basically a blank canvas right now.
So, what exactly is driving this unprecedented shift? Well, it's kind of a perfect storm of disruptive forces. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are rapidly changing what machines can do. The Internet of Things, robotics, and 3D printing are completely altering manufacturing in our daily lives. Big data analytics are increasing the stakes of every single business decision. And on top of all that, human migration due to climate change and geopolitical volatility is putting immense pressure on labor markets everywhere. The landscape is literally shifting beneath our feet. The really crucial point here is how this affects the fundamental structure of employment. The World Economic Forum notes something super fascinating. Only a minority of the world's 3 billion workers are directly employed by large multinational employers. However, those giant companies are absolutely vital because they act as anchors. Think of them like massive ships steadying a fleet in a storm. They support smaller firms, local entrepreneurs, and the much broader, more nimble gig economy. Understanding this dynamic is absolutely critical for governments, businesses, and really just individuals who want to mitigate risks and seize the opportunities in this new landscape.
And that brings us to our final section, Section 4, Skills for the Future, Achieving Change.
With all these disruptions happening, how do we actually achieve change? What are the specific expectations and skills that you are going to need to survive and thrive in this totally new employment landscape? Well, the reality is the burden of adaptation is shifting heavily onto you, the individual worker. The days of a single, static career path are fading fast. To succeed, you have to adapt your expectations. We are moving into a world dominated by flexible scheduling, cloud technology, and the crowdsourcing share economy. Because of this global marketplace, marketing your own personal brand and committing to continuous, lifelong reskilling and retraining, those are no longer optional. They are an absolute imperative for every modern worker today. Now, as AI and robotics take over more routine tasks, you're going to need a buffer against automation. And this brilliantly illustrates what those buffers are. Distinctly human skills, things like critical thinking and complex decision-making, which really means knowing how to ask the right questions, emotional intelligence, cognitive flexibility, creativity, mathematical reasoning, and time management. No matter what crazy new jobs are invented for that 65% of future workers, these uniquely human capabilities will be in incredibly high demand across all fields. Which leaves us with this final, really profound question to consider as we wrap up this explainer. If we are moving toward a world where machines can do the preponderance of manual and routine labor, what does that mean for us? Will transformations in the world of work transform our basic expectations of how we actually live our lives? Will it leave us free to explore entirely new means of human expression? The old order is rapidly fading, and the future is exactly what we make of it. Thank you so much for joining me to explore these incredible shifts. And hey, keep focusing on those uniquely human skills as you navigate your own future world of work.